Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Breaking News, a Finnerty and Liccione Mystery Series book number 3 by Wanda Venters, MD, and Mary Ray, MD. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Tuesday, January 21st, 2020. To Chris Hill, editor, Bay City Daily, regarding 18th anniversary, January 18th, 2020. I wish this were a happy anniversary, but as you know, since you're reading a letter from the family of Luther Wood, it's not. My father has been gone for 18 years. My mother wrote to this newspaper yearly for the last 17 years. Now she's gone. The duty falls to me. Let me remind you of the facts. 1. In January 2002, my father's body parts were discovered washed up by the jetty at East Beach. 2. The Galveston Police Department investigated the case. 3. The cause of death was determined to be a shark attack. 4. My mother was encouraged to leave town. My father's horrific death on January 11, 2002 occurred 2 months after Morris Black's body parts were found and Robert Durst was suspected of his murder. Both murders involved dismemberment. I'm sure I do not need to remind you or your readers of the details. Our family's concerns are that my father's death and mutilation had the characteristics of a copycat murder. A shark attack was highly unlikely since my father was not a fisherman, nor would he take a swim in the Gulf in January. As explained, perhaps poorly by my mother, the Galveston Police Department refused to thoroughly investigate his case. I have theories regarding the motivation for a quick resolution and subsequent cover-up. I'm sure that the Galveston Hospitality Consortium didn't want another lurid murder investigation. I am now asking for your intervention. I've been following your work. Your investigative journalism has garnered national attention. Mr. Hill, it's time to put this matter to rest. Respectfully, T. Wood. TWRE6837@gmail.com. Chris reread the letter. I've had 5 of these letters about Luther Wood since becoming editor. No expletives in this one. I can print it. He walked over to the picture window and sighed. Since taking over the Bay City Daily, Chris had never had an easy year, nor had the paper itself. The Daily gave up its historic and beautiful downtown building for this spit of land obtained at a fire sale price in 1965. A power broker in Texas journalism purchased the paper and quickly sold it for a profit. Throughout the turmoil and subsequent changes in management, the Bay City Daily continued to publish in print and now online. Chris's daily mantra since joining the paper 20 years ago: we've got to keep it up. He left his office and joined Willa Owen, his assistant, and Tom Hassan at the work table. After several years, Tom had risen through the ranks to become Chris's assistant editor. Having been at the paper longer than anyone on the staff, including Chris, Willa was also the unofficial historian and archivist. Looks like the letter arrived, Chris said. Yep, right on schedule, said Willa, but this one's different. Really different. You two are going to have to enlighten me about the history of this letter. Different from what? Asked Tom. Willa flipped open one of her innumerable spiral notebooks and glanced at her handwritten notes. In 2002, we had our first letter from Janelle Wood. She alleged that her husband, Luther, had been murdered. The problem was that she also said the perpetrator was the spawn of Satan. She used language that was very colorful about our Galveston County DA, the medical examiner, and the detective assigned to her husband's case. Chris looked up and added, in other words, it was unprintable, crazy, and obscene. Plus, she never provided a phone number or address to verify her existence. Those letters continued yearly until now. This letter looks like a lawyer wrote it. It meets our guidelines for publication. T. Wood has a point. Galveston's hospitality businesses had reasons for squelching the story. How many of these yearly letters have you seen, Chris? Tom asked. Around 5. Does that seem right, Willa? Yes, I have copies of those 5. I filed them like you asked me to, Willa paused. Before that, I think they got tossed. If we print this letter, we better give the police a heads up, Tom said. I've got Detective Ileana Sudan's number under my thumb. Let's print the letter and ask for tips. Let's also get a dedicated line for anonymous phone calls. Order one for 2 months. As she heard Chris's car pull into the driveway, Marnie slowly came downstairs. Stop tripping me, she said to the 2 dogs whirling around her ankles. I'm off balance enough with this bump in front of me. How are you feeling? Chris asked as he came in the door. Like a blue whale? When I was 23 and pregnant with EJ, I did a 12-hour shift in the ICU before going into labor. Now it takes me an hour to get up from my nap. Worry creased Chris's forehead. Just a few more months to go. Thanks for the pep talk. I've always said that the last month of pregnancy was so that the delivery seemed like deliverance. I now think that it's the last 2 months. She didn't add that after her last delivery she almost died. She was scared that this time she might. That thought is more appropriate for my therapist or my obstetrician. Chris had enough to deal with. Are you taking it easy? He asked. Yes, mild activity only. Looking at her swollen ankle, she said, couldn't fit in my running shoes anyway. Chris smiled and gave her and her huge belly a bear hug. I promise that once the baby's here, I'll take over half the responsibilities. Marnie wanted to say something snarky like he could take all the responsibility for the next 9 months, but she was saved by his phone buzzing. Hi, Ileana, Chris said. Thanks for calling me back. I just wanted to give you a heads up about a letter we're printing in the paper tomorrow. It accuses the Galveston Police Department of botching the investigation of Luther Wood's death in 2002. The family doesn't buy the official explanation that the cause of death was a shark attack. Chris paused, listening to Ileana's question. Yeah, a while ago. We've been getting the letters for 17 years, but this is the first one that we can print. We thought we would just toss it out there and ask for any leads. We're going to have an anonymous tip line for the paper, but the police department might get calls as well. We wanted you to be aware of the situation. Another pause. She's right here. He handed Marnie the phone. Hi, Ileana. Marnie paused. I'm hanging in there. I haven't killed Chris yet. She shot Chris a smile. He took the opportunity to go upstairs and change clothes. We would love to come to dinner. Our social calendar is open. EJ said that she likes working with Ben. I know Chris is planning to start the interns at the paper on some new assignments. Another pause. Yes, February 1st works great. See you then. Marnie hung up. Marnie went to the kitchen to check on the chili relleno casserole. Rosa, Chris's long-term housekeeper and friend, insisted on doing most of the cooking. Marnie had no complaints. After moving to Galveston last fall, Marnie had traveled multiple times to Denver to work on her research program. It had been a grueling schedule. The study was now set to run efficiently during her upcoming maternity leave. I think one of the most rewarding things that I did last fall was to help Rosa get her GED. The story of her missing her senior year of high school was heartbreaking. The time spent with Rosa made it easy for them to agree on a new division of responsibilities. Rosa and Chris had been a team for the last 8 years. She had worked for his parents before that. Chris was not interested in taking on the domestic responsibilities that Rosa had handled for years. He was eager to make more time for his new role as dad. In a three-way conversation, Marnie, Chris, and Rosa discussed changes that they would make with Marnie's addition to the household. Rosa had been excited to reduce her work week to 4 days, Monday through Thursday. Having a GED gave Rosa the confidence to teach a cooking class elective focused on traditional and regional Mexican cuisine at the high school. Marnie inhaled the delicious aroma of the casserole. What a luxury to have dinner prepared at least 4 days a week. Rosa often made extra meals and left them in the freezer or refrigerator. Cooking was her passion. Having passed the 30-week mark in her pregnancy, Marnie was beginning to believe that this pregnancy would result in a baby, not another loss. Episodes of bleeding early in the pregnancy caused her to fear that she would miscarry again. Now, in her early 40s, she was going to have an infant to care for after a 20-year break. That was scary. She fed her dogs, who acted as if they hadn't eaten in weeks. That's the lab and the labradoodle. Harley was a red miniature doodle and only weighed 25 pounds, but she was the alpha dog and kept Jack, a solid brown pup of 60 pounds, in line. Marnie was glad that the poodle half of their genetics kept them from shedding. Chris entered the kitchen and put his arms around her from behind. She leaned back into him. They were going to do fine as parents, even if by the time the child was playing soccer, everyone in this South Texas town would think they were the grandparents. Stop it, she scolded herself. As they ate dinner, Chris told Marnie the details of the letter and what was known about Luther Wood's death. He mentioned that he planned to put his interns to work on the case. This sounds like a great distraction for me, Marnie said. Can I become an intern with EJ? Chris laughed. It's enough that I have your daughter on my staff. I'm afraid that you're going to have to participate vicariously. How's the neurofeedback study going in Aurora? As Dr. Liccione, a new physician on staff at the Front Range VA Hospital in Aurora, Colorado, Marnie had started a neurofeedback study on the treatment of PTSD in vets and helped solve a murder case involving a young veteran. Because of her pregnancy and Chris's job, she had moved to Galveston in September and was working remotely. It's running smoothly. Allison said that Esther was keeping the study on track. They should have some new data for me to crunch before my maternity leave. I'm glad that I was able to go up in person before the holidays and check things out. My OB says I can't fly anymore. I'm glad she said it, Chris said. Keeps me from being the bad guy. After all the trouble last summer, I'm sure Allison is keeping a close eye on every detail. It's great that you can work remotely. Marnie smiled. I'll stay in my lane, but you have to let me know how the case develops. The study helps me maintain a professional life, but I do love a good mystery. Keeps my mind from worrying about the bump. Chris stood up to do the dishes. Let's take Junior and the pups for a walk in a few minutes. We can discuss baby furniture.